Great. So thank you for joining us today. I'm Zara Castillo, Director for the Export Finance Assistance out of Washington, and today's co-host and co-organizer along with the Washington State Department of Agriculture. So I've met most of you, so I won't go into details of what we do aside from letting you know that we provide free advice to local companies on the basics on how to get paid. We provide free webinar trainings just like today. So we received a grant to fund this, so you don't have to pay for it. We can also do referrals because we have a lot of partnerships, just like my co-host today, Washington State Department of Ag. So back to the webinar. In the world of exporting, you're going to need to figure out the best way to market and distribute your product. There's no one right answer to it. It really depends on every situation. So today you'll learn pointers how to determine that, what resources are available for ag companies like yourselves, and what kinds of questions you should be asking with your partners and or buyers. This whole session will be 1 hour long with 15 minutes of instruction, and the rest will be a Q&A. Throughout the program though, if you have any questions, please send it via the chat box or the Q&A button. If we can easily answer them via chat, we will do so. And last thing, I also included in the chat box a handout that will be referenced during the presentation. You'll get copies of the slides this afternoon too. And I might send a survey. It's completely confidential. Your feedback allows us to continue to offer our programs like this for free. It also gives us an idea if the topic works for you or if it doesn't. Either way, it's fine. Let us know so we can continue to develop programs that works. And so now I pass this on to my partner in crime, Julie Johnson from the Washington State Department of Agriculture.
Thank you, Zara. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I recognize most of your names, so welcome back. Again, my name is Julie Johnson. I am the Export Development and Outreach Trade Specialist for the Washington State Department of Agriculture. Again, many of you already know, but I want you to know that our program works with small to medium-sized Washington suppliers of agricultural and food products, both fresh and processed, and beverages, also nursery, hay, and pet foods. We really work with suppliers at all stages of the exporting process. So please reach out with any questions or any assistance you need along the way, and I will see how I can help you or who I can refer you to get that information that you're looking for. And now it's my pleasure to introduce you Kelly Green. She is with the Innovative Global Logistics Strategies, and she is here to present today. Thank you, Kelly.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Julie and Zara. I appreciate both of your organizations and your trust in me. And thank you to everyone who's joined on this call. I guess it's good morning for you. I'm on the East Coast, so it's actually a little after 1 here. So it's lunchtime for me, and you guys are still probably on your first or second cup of coffee. So I hope it's a little bit warmer there than it is here. I woke up to -6 this morning. So that was not exactly my idea of a balmy start to my day. It would be a little bit better if it was, 90, but that did not happen. So I'm hoping it's a little bit warmer for all of you. Today's focus is really on distribution strategies on the export side. These, of course, work in other methods as well for import, but because you are all exporters, to my understanding, we're really looking at how to help you get into a market if you're a new exporter, and or how to expand your market if you're already exporting and you're looking to grow, and some of the options that you have. Some of you may be doing exporting through one of these methods and looking to see if maybe another method would be best for you. So that's really what we're focused on today, is giving you some of the tools so that you can try to make some informed decisions. So let's get started. Hopefully you can all see my screen. And for some reason it's not, oh, there we go, not advancing. In short, what we're going to cover today is what is a distribution strategy. It may or may not be what you're thinking, and types of the distribution export strategies. And then, as Zara said, how to select the strategy that is best for you. So yes, a distribution strategy is the methods used to bring your goods and products to your customers. That's really what you're all thinking. But what I really want to get your head around is that it isn't just logistics. People tend to think distribution and they think a warehouse. And while that is distribution, a distribution strategy goes beyond just the physical movement or the operational movement of, putting in a truck, sending it down the road, or putting it on an ocean carrier. That's physically how you're distributing your products, but your strategy is going to be how you do your market entry. And that encompasses your sales, your finance, your logistics. All pieces must work together in your strategy. We are focused on the distribution piece of it, but I want to point out that if you were on the session that I did on logistics back in October, if you haven't, I know that they recorded that, you can watch it. And that's really on how to choose your best logistics partners. And that can be included with the distribution or the warehousing strategies. And next week, we're going to be talking about Incoterms, and it's not just going to be here are all the 20 Incoterms. This is going to be how to choose the right Incoterm based on today's discussion of your distribution strategy. So if you're not signed up for that, I would encourage you to consider that, because a lot of companies don't understand that all of this needs to work together, and they sort of piecemeal it, and then they find out that, gosh, that actually isn't the right Incoterm for how they're distributing. So I want you to understand that. Now, the goal is, of course, for all of these organizations, you want to be the most cost effective and you want to increase your overall profitability. But as you're going to see with some of these methods today, that's a challenge and a balancing effort. There are many methods that are not maybe as cost effective, but they might increase your overall profitability. And on the alternate, there are some methods that are more cost effective, but might lower your profitability. So it's really going to come down to what is your overall goal, your objectives, and what makes most sense for your company. I also want to point out that you can use more than one distribution strategy. You don't necessarily have to pick one and stick to it and be committed to that one way. In fact, most companies that are exporting and doing a robust business are using multiple strategies, sometimes in the same market, or one strategy in one market and another in another. Now, if you are brand new to exporting, my first and most serious recommendation would be that you pick one country to focus on in the beginning, because if you try to figure everything out in multiple places, it will become extremely overwhelming. There is a learning curve. And so your best bet is to focus on one market and one distribution strategy to begin with, and then expand from there. But I do want you to know it is okay to use multiple strategies in the long term. It's all about making those choices, selecting the best markets where you have the best chances. And again, the best market, by the way, may not be the market that you think it is. You may have in your mind that you want to export to China. Someone told you China was an easy market or a good market for your products. But when you do your market research and keeping your mind open, you may discover a market you weren't aware of. So keep in mind that it may not be what you think. It's not always so intuitive when it comes to the exporting market. There's also things you need to think about in terms of localizing your product and your marketing materials. You might need to change how you market your product from how you're doing it in the United States. Might mean putting things in foreign language. It might mean actually changing the product packaging or your labeling to be more attractive to a foreign market. It also means working with local companies and your channel partners online, and doing a lot of business that way. And if you're working with your partners, selecting and convincing the best ones. If you have several different distributors who are interested in your product, then you have to make some decisions. You want to monitor and manage your sales channels properly. I think that's common sense. And of course, you want to support your brand with the right online advertising and PR. And yes, of course, your international distribution strategy also is regarding your logistics and your physical distribution. Now, these are just some basic things I want to start with. We're going to talk a little bit later about some other things to consider specifically to you and your market. But as a high level general, specifically for agriculture companies, you absolutely need to consider your shelf life. You may have a product that has a very short shelf life, and that may limit how you actually distribute and where you can distribute to. So you need to consider all of those things. Do you have any temperature control requirements? Does it need to be stored in refrigeration, or is it sensitive to cold? What about shipping costs and availability? Definitely a hot button issue that we all have going on. Unless you're living under a rock, and I'm sure you're not, you have seen the mountain list of container ships that are parked off the West Coast waiting to come in. So you would think with all of those containers coming in, there's going to be no problem getting a slot going out and getting a container. right? Because there's thousands of containers. Wrong. And actually, it's been in the news recently that the federal government is looking at how they can specifically help agriculture companies with getting those containers and getting on a ship. So without getting into too much, I do want to explain why you're having a hard time if you are finding containers on these ships that are going back with empty containers. And you're thinking, why aren't they giving me these empty containers? It's all about money for the shipping lines, and the prices on import, because we're an importing nation more than an exporting one, right now are like $24,000 for an ocean container for shipping costs from Asia to the United States. Well, if they take your container full of agriculture products and export it, prices are always a little less going back the other way. So they're going to make less money. But agriculture products, your shipping cost is also going to be based on your commodity, right? And agriculture tends to be a lower cost commodity for them, unlike electronics or other things. So you're taking a container and sending it back. And then when it gets there, it has to be offloaded, and they lose use of that container when they could be making $24,000 to have it do a quick turn and come back. So their goal is to get offloaded as quick as possible, since they've been sitting out parked, and get those empties and go. They don't really care about making a little bit of money on you when they can make a lot more coming back and not tying up that container. So that just gives you a little bit of an idea of what's going on right now and why you're struggling maybe to find containers. But this is a long-term issue you need to consider anyway, whether you're shipping by ocean, air, truck, rail, if it's going to Canada or Mexico, for example. You need to focus on what those costs are. One thing I really want to tell you about transportation costs, they're very high right now. They will come down someday. I can't tell you when that day is. I don't have a crystal ball. But I can tell you about 6-7 years ago, at that time, prices were higher than any of us had ever seen. Now, today, they are definitely higher than I've seen in my 30 years of doing business. But those prices then plummeted a couple of years later to rock bottom, all-time lowest prices we'd ever seen. And then they came back up again. It is a cyclical nature of shipping costs. If you wait until the price is low and you think this is a great time for me to get into exporting, sure, it's cheaper then. But what happens when that price comes up? You're going to still have to deal with it when it comes up. So you need to consider the long range plan of how you're going to ship and distribute your product. Shipping time is also a concern. It can take, as many as a few days if you're going to someplace like Canada, to up to a month, depending on where else you're going by ocean. Storage costs, if you choose to go that way, warehousing costs in third-party warehouses around the world can be expensive. And you also need to consider currency fluctuations, especially if you're dealing with a volatile currency in the country you're doing business in. Even if you're accepting payment in American dollars, that currency fluctuation with the foreign currency can affect whether or not your buyer buys. And how are you accepting payment? Are you doing it with a letter of credit? Are you doing it on credit, or are you doing all cash up front? That can also limit some of your distribution opportunities in your customers. Market potential, absolutely need to look at that. You need to figure out also, are you introducing your product into a country where, let's just use apples. I'm a New Yorker, so we got great apples. I know you've got great apples. Are you selling to a country that also has apples and is buying apples from other places? Then you're competing with all these other people. Or are you a specialized, say you've got apple butter? Are you going into a market that doesn't know what apple butter is? So you're sort of trying to create a market. There might be a potential for it. If they like apples, they might like apple butter. But if you don't know for sure if there's a market there, you have to consider if you're making a market, if a market already exists, how saturated that market is, and really whether or not you're competing with a lot of people or a few people. Remember, if a market shows a lot of potential, it usually means it's not saturated. If you go and you say, okay, there's hundreds of people selling this product, I know that there's a market for it, but now you're trying to take away market share from the market that already exists. So you really want to look for a country that wants your product and might not be completely saturated. And it's okay to try and go into a market and try your product that might not already be there, but understand that creating market where they don't know what your product is does take longer. Now, we also want to consider how your product is sold. Is it sold on an e-commerce way, a retail? But very important to remember this one piece. How you are selling it in the United States may not be how you sell it in a foreign country. things are done differently in different countries. So you may be selling direct to consumer today, and that may end up being a retail customer in a foreign country. You may be selling retail today, and it may end up being a restaurant in a foreign country. You need to understand what that market is. Price sensitivity, big issue, big issue, big issue. I don't care what your product is. Trying to sell our products at US prices in a foreign country is extremely difficult. So you need to be aware that you may have to lower that price point, and only you can determine where that bottom line price for you is that makes sense for your profitability to do business in that country. There are going to be some countries that are going to be more open to the price, and others that, of course, have very, very, very low price points. That's something you need to consider. Trade agreements and a relationship with the United States. Now, these change, as we all know and as we've seen, but it's important. And I'm not going to tell you not to go into China, but I'm going to use the example of recent years with our trade agreement with China that, we went through a little bit of a challenge here. And I'll give you an example. I was working with a lumber company, and they had over the years built a tremendous exporting business to China, so much so that it was bigger than the rest of the world and the United States combined. They did over 60% of their business to China. Only about 15% of their business ended up being in the United States. So their relationship with China had grown so much that it accounted for more than half of all of their business, and other export markets as well. But that trade battle that went on affected them tremendously, and they ended up getting hit with a 25% tariff. Now, things have changed and things are okay, but it really showed them that putting all of their eggs and big eggs in one basket was a little bit dangerous for them, and they started to really rethink how to diversify. Now, again, I said to start with one country. You absolutely should not start with 12 countries, but your long-term export strategy should be to, one, not put all of your eggs in one basket and make that market bigger than your domestic market. And number two should be to diversify. We know statistically that companies that export are less likely to actually go out of business, and that they can weather storms a whole lot better. Makes sense. You've diversified your business, but it is important to look at where those trade agreements are strong and the relationship with that country in the United States has a good relationship. But again, be aware that those things do change at times. And if you can diversify by having multiple countries, you're going to have a longer term success. You also want to look at your country legal requirements for import license and certifications. And they are different everywhere you're going to go, because we're dealing with food type products. There are pretty strict regulations. If you, I know you're not importing, but to give you an example, anything coming into the United States has to go through FDA inspection. So, obviously it makes sense. These are food products you're putting in. So countries are going to have labeling, language requirements, sometimes import licenses, and even requirements that you can't directly import. Mexico is a perfect example of that. You cannot be a foreign importer. You have to actually have an agent that does that import for you. And so there are countries that you need to understand how, and that will affect your distribution strategy. Brazil also is a very difficult market. It might be a great market for the product you have, but it will affect your distribution strategy simply because it's a difficult market to try and penetrate and get in from the legal requirements. Finally, if you are engaging in alcohol, and I think that there were some people that signed up for this that are wine or spirits or trading companies, you will require a TTB license through the federal government. Usually you need a bond, and every state has its own rule as well. You need to be moving with bonded carriers. So there is a cost component that goes into that, and another level of scrutiny with regulations. So you do need to understand all of these things if you're going to be doing any kind of international distribution strategy, and these should go into your consideration. So the two types of distribution that we're going to talk about today are the primary ones: indirect exporting and direct exporting. I can say that. So let's first look at indirect exporting. And in the handout that Zara, I believe, shared in the chat, you will see that I've given a little bit more of a description than we're going to spend time on here of each one of these things that you can take with you, because I don't want to spend a lot of time just going through each one and telling you, because they're all kind of similar. So you have that for your information when we go forward. In short, indirect exporting is using an intermediary. You're using a third-party company, and often they are responsible for finding you the buyers, shipping the products, and getting paid. it's great in many ways for a smaller company because it allows you to get into the foreign market pretty quickly without a lot of the complexities that you're going to have if you go direct, even though in most cases you're still responsible for US export compliance. And I want to make that clear. The exception would be if you're selling to a US company and you don't know that they're exporting. But if you are selling to somebody and you have knowledge that they're exporting, you still have some export compliance requirements. But there are several different kinds of intermediary firms. We're going to talk about those here in a minute, but I want you to know they're not all that different. In a sense, they are basically representing your product for you in a foreign country, and it takes a lot of the responsibilities away from you. Those would be a commission agent or a foreign buying agent. Now, this is not like you having a sales representative that represents you. This is actually somebody who represents the buyer in the foreign country. Could be one of their commission buying agents, or it could actually be a trading company on the other side of the country, other side of the world. Then there's export management companies and export trading companies. Now, there are some subtle differences in what they are. We're not going to focus too much on those because they're essentially the same. And that's basically a company. I used to own one myself, that basically is going out to try and find products for a market. Now, they usually either focus on a commodity, so they might be specific to agriculture, or they could be, electronics, it could be automobiles or, equipment, but they don't typically do agriculture and automobiles. And if they do, they must be a pretty large company that has a pretty wide portfolio. But a lot of companies are very small and they focus on one commodity or one country. So maybe they're focusing on China or Asia or Latin America or a handful of markets. They don't typically focus on the whole world, like I said, and multiple product lines that are very different unless they're very large. Now, trading companies started in Japan back in the 70s and 80s. I was fortunate enough to get my start in my career actually working at a trading company in Japan. But believe it or not, they used to be illegal in the United States. They're not as big in the United States. They are legal now. But they're not as large here as they are in other countries around the world, most notably Asia, which is really, again, where they started. So it's a form that a lot of companies have tried, pop-ups, mom and pop companies have started trading companies. But this is where I want you to be very concerned with some of the questions that you will see also in that handout. And we're going to talk a little bit more in a minute, because a lot of these companies have not been in business very long, and they may not have a long track record. They might be brand new. They might be trying to get into the market. They might not have a lot of customers. They might be using you to try and grow their business. So you want to be a little leery about that, but also there are great opportunities if this is something that you want to do to get into the market quickly, and you can find the right company that can truly represent you. In many ways, they're representing the buyer, though, because the buyers will come to them just like a buying agent does for them, and will sometimes come to them and say, hey, I'm looking for, apples. And they will then start calling around to you and other Apple companies that say, hey, I want to buy your apples. And that's okay. You can certainly do that. It helps you get into the foreign market. But there are some things to be concerned with, and we'll talk in a minute. And the other thing would be export agents, merchants, and remarketers. Now, the remarketers thing is only to be used if you really don't care about your brand, because what they're doing is buying your stuff and they're remarketing it under their name or under another name, and they're relabeling it. And if you just want to make the sale and you don't really care about the market potential or your name, then that's a way to go. But if you're looking to grow your business overseas, remarketers probably not the right way. Some of the advantages of indirect exporting: you don't need any international experience. Really, you can pretty much do this just as you do a domestic sale and not have to think too much about it. A lot of a lower risk to begin exporting because, again, they're only going to sell your products. And when they get the sale, then they're going to come to you for the product. Faster entry into an international market than if you try to do so yourself, which can take longer. And you have minimal involvement in the process. It does allow you more time to focus on your domestic business. You technically can learn exporting as you go, but I will be honest, most companies that do indirect don't spend a lot of time getting to understand it. They use this as the easy way to get into a market, and then they kind of don't go any further. That's one of the downsides to using this is if you're really trying to grow your business in a long term, this is not the only strategy to use. You might want to take the harder route and go direct, which we'll talk about in a moment, so that you learn as much as you can. And then there's still opportunities to use these indirect methods as you grow your business. But again, this is totally up to you. If you're very constrained on finances and you really want to get into the market quickly, indirect might be for you. Now, depending on the type of intermediary, you might not have to actually worry about shipping and logistics, but you might. It depends again on your agreement and what you're actually doing. If it's a buyer's agent in a foreign country, this is where those Incoterms that we're going to talk about next week may come into play, where they actually negotiate for you to do the shipping and the logistics to get it to the foreign country. So again, your method and whether or not you have to involve yourself in shipping and logistics on too much and documents and all that is going to depend on the intermediary you use, and then ultimately what those Incoterms are. And you get an opportunity to field test your products for export potential. There is a danger, however, in this. If that trading company is testing your product, you may not get accurate feedback. They may be doing it in the wrong market. Again, important that you do your market research before you jump on the bandwagon with an intermediary. If a trading company comes to you and says, hey, I'd like to try and sell your product in China, but you haven't done any research and you don't know whether China is even a good market for your product, how do you know? If you just trust them and then they come back to you a few months later and say, your product didn't sell, we couldn't find any buyers, you're going to walk away from that going, gosh, I guess, I don't have an export potential. And so you can get very discouraged if you go this route without having done your research, both in terms of the market you should be going into, as well as making sure that the trading company or intermediary you're working with has the kind of experience and customer base to actually make it a go for your product. If that happens to you, I'm going to tell you, and I hope you remember this, do not get discouraged and give up on exporting. Look again, find another way to get into a different market and keep pushing forward. There are tremendous opportunities for exporting all over the world. Agriculture is one of the biggest markets. Don't miss the opportunity because maybe you picked somebody who gave you a discouraging answer. So if you do choose this method, please remember that. Disadvantages. Your profits tend to be lower. Now remember, a buying agent is trying to buy as low as possible. That's their job. The trading company wants to get it as low as possible because they need to pay for all the marketing. Because remember, they're doing all that for you. They're arranging and finding the buyers. They may be going to trade shows and they need to make a profit. So they need to cover their costs and their profit. So very often your wholesale price in the United States, let's just say it's $10 a unit. Okay. That's your wholesale price. They're going to come to you and they're going to want like $7. They're going to try and get you even lower than maybe your normal wholesale price because they have to be able to account for all of those costs overseas. And remember, foreign buyers often are looking for a lower cost. So keep in mind that this is why your profits are likely going to be lower. The margins are not as high because you've got that middleman involved. You're also losing control over your foreign sales. You're putting it in the hands of all of these intermediaries. They're doing it all. You rarely are going to know who the customer is. And that means you're going to lose an opportunity to sell them additional products that you may have, or even an additional volume, because you don't know if the intermediary is also buying those products or competing products from somewhere else, unless you have asked. And you're losing out on the opportunity to grow the relationship. You are a step removed. You might feel a little bit out of the loop. The intermediary might actually be using your products to test, as we have just said, that a market for other products. And another question that I've listed in that sheet that you have as a handout, and we're going to talk about in a minute, is they might actually be selling competing products. I would caution you on going with anybody who is selling competing products. If they're selling a complementary product or something similar in the same line, let me give you an example. Applesauce and apple butter. They're Apple products, but they're not really competing. They're completely different things. You may have apple butter. Maybe they're already trading in other Apple products. That actually would probably be a good fit because they understand the market. They know that there's a demand where they're going and everybody loves apples. So that's great. But if they're wanting to take a product like apple butter and they've never done anything with any Apple products and they don't understand the market and whether or not there's any market potential for apples or Apple products, then they might be using you to see, just throw a dart at it. Can they get you into the market or not? And it might not be the best fit. if you're going to put the product in someone else's hand, it's really hard to redirect your efforts. Now, what I mean by this is, what if they don't represent your product well? If they don't represent it well, or they sell it at a wrong price, and you at some point decide you want to go to another method of direct, you're essentially competing against your own product at a different price point. You're potentially got a bad reputation you may not even be aware of in that market. So keep in mind that it's not necessarily bad to use indirect exporting. There's a lot of reasons to use it depending on what your goals are. Again, if you're going to Brazil, this might be something that you do, because Brazil is a little bit of a more difficult market. So finding somebody who's already established there might actually be to your benefit. But a lot of companies use this just because it's lower cost and it's easier to get in without considering the long term. And that's what I really want you to be aware of, is you need to think, what are your long-term goals, not just quick and easy and get in, because you potentially are limiting your long-term growth and your profitability. They may not be going, as we said, to the best market for your products, and that negative feedback could deter your efforts. And again, potentially lower sales in the long run that may limit your market potential, especially if that product was not represented well. So let's talk a little bit about direct exporting. So as you would expect, direct exporting is dealing directly with a foreign buyer, one way or another, regardless of whether that foreign buyer is a distributor, whether it's a retail outlet, or even if you're going to sell direct to consumer, depending on your product. That's what direct exporting means. You're in the driver's seat. You have more control over the process. You have potentially higher profits and a closer relationship to the overseas buyer in the marketplace. Normally, you're gonna do the research as we suggested to find out the market you want to penetrate and select the best distribution channel. But as I said, you're going to want to look for that market. I think use those resources with Julie and Zara and a lot of our other government agencies, the country commercial guides, for example, and do your market research regardless. Even if you're doing indirect exporting, don't just look at indirect as an easy way in a market and that you don't have to do anything. You want to make sure, if you're going to use one of those methods, that you are still looking for the best market and the best potential route for your success. But definitely with direct, you have to do these things. Some of the direct types of exporting, the more common ones, are you hiring a sales representative or broker in a foreign country, a distributor, direct to foreign retailers, direct sale to end users, which could be, excuse me, consumers or manufacturers. So for example, if you have a raw material like apples, I'm picking on apples today, and maybe it's a manufacturer of applesauce in that country. So you may be selling them the apples, and then they're going to manufacture it into something else. That would also be a direct sale. Now, a foreign warehouse and using free trade zones technically fall under what we call foreign direct investment, which is slightly different than direct exporting. But for the purposes of this, I put it into direct exporting so we can talk about it. If you're brand new to exporting, these are not likely, those last two, not likely to be the method that you would use, because it requires a lot more outlay of money and you really need to already have your market established. And I'm sorry, I'm getting that tickle in my throat. Hopefully the water will help. And free trade zones. But if you are already involved and looking to expand your ability in a market that you're already in, maybe with this pandemic and supply chain issues, you've been struggling with how to get the products to your customer quicker, and you decide that you want to be in that market and a little bit closer to them, that's when a foreign warehouse and a free trade zone can come in. So again, those are two longer term strategies, not necessarily in the short term if you're new to exporting. And you're going to hate me. I am getting that dry air tickle. Welcome to winter in upstate New York. All right, direct exporting advantages. Well, the obvious is greater profits. There's no middleman, and you can set the price. Price sensitivity, remember, is one of those things you need to concern yourself with. But whatever the going market rate is, you don't have anybody else you have to lower the price for. You're selling direct. You're also going to have greater control over all of the transaction. You know who your customer is, and they know who you are. And that is really important. You are also showing your customers you're fully committed to the export process. You are going to learn so much in doing so, even though it may take time and be a little intimidating in the beginning, but you're going to develop a better understanding of the market and how to export, potentially have the opportunity for greater sales, and you're going to get better feedback. Customers are extremely open. If you ask them for feedback, they will give you the feedback. So you're going to know what's performing, what's not, what they like, what they don't. I promise I do not have COVID. All right. The disadvantages of direct exporting. It's going to cost you money. You have to do marketing in a foreign country or do trade shows. You probably have to get a website that is specific to that country. Your time getting into the market is going to take more time. Again, an indirect marketing strategy or distribution strategy, you may be dealing with a buyer that already has a customer you can get in tomorrow. This is going to take some time to actually find those customers and make it work. Patience is definitely a requirement. It's going to require more people power at your level. You're going to be servicing the business. It will demand more responsibility from you. You're going to be accountable for what happens. No buffer zone. If that product shows up and it's, spoiled or damaged, they're going to be yelling at you and not on the trading company. And because you're here and they're in another time zone, assumably on the other side of the world, you're not going to be able to respond as quickly as maybe somebody locally could. You have to handle the logistics. Some, even if the customer is routing, even if they say, hey, we're going to ship it from the United States, you still may have to deliver it to the port. And there's a greater risk with your cost and your time. Okay, so what method is best? Yeah, this is the $3 million question. And the answer is it depends. Now, everybody hates that, right? It depends. It's not an answer. What does it depend on? It depends on you and the country that you're exporting to. So it's not a simple answer. It's not one size fits all. That is definitely not how it's going to be. You might know somebody down the road who's doing it one way, and that may not be the right way for you. It might be a different country, and it just might not work for you from a cost standpoint or a time standpoint. So bottom line is, what are your goals? You want to maximize your profitability? And I think most of you are probably going to say yes. That's every company's, response, right? So in that case, direct exporting is typically the most profitable because it cuts out the middleman. But it takes time to find your customers, and there are a lot more costs to you. So it's kind of like, yes, you're going to make more, but you're going to spend more to do it. You want an easier, faster way to start exporting? And you're probably looking at indirect exporting. But you're losing the control, and it's likely to be less profitable. Is there a happy medium? Well, that's where you got to start doing the trade-offs to figure out, do I use one way in one country, or do I use one way to get in and then I expand my opportunities? This is where I would tell you to be very leery of something called an exclusive contract. Now, a lot of people will tell you that an exclusive contract is the way to go. And I'm not going to say that you should never consider an exclusive contract. But when you are first starting into a market or first starting in exporting, I would not sign an exclusive contract. I would first of all do a trial with any company, whether trading company, distributor, indirect, or direct. You're going to want something to try them out. And you want to keep your options open for market entry. You want to see where you're going. Only after a decent amount of time, if you see that they've really got the whole market covered, then I would consider an exclusive contract. But be careful about just jumping on that bandwagon, because again, I want you to think long-term, not short-term. A short-term strategy can have effects on you in the long term. If you sign an exclusive contract and there's wording in there about non-compete in the future, you can cancel that contract, but you may be hogtied and not be able to get back into that market for a period of time. So again, really look at the terms of conditions and really think about it before you sign something that's direct, that is exclusive. And make sure if you do it, that it makes sense for you. Things that you need to consider on your side: the cost of your marketing, your research, and your logistics, and what it's going to cost you, your overall profit potential, how much time you are willing to spend, and how much patience you have. Now, when I say time, I don't mean time doing paperwork or customer service. I mean time to actually cultivate and find a customer and go to trade shows and really build the marketing and the research and the logistics, plus the time once you start doing it with the day-to-day operations. So there is cost involved, and time is one of them. And it's a commodity that is hard to quantify, but you need to. You also need to look at your inventory and the shelf life considerations. Again, if you are shipping something that's got a short shelf life of only, 6 weeks, and you're shipping it to a distributor, and that distributor is going to sit on it for 6 weeks, plus your shipping time, it's going to be lost inventory. And you need to consider that, especially if you're going to do something like distribution through a warehouse. And your ability to accept payments internationally, including letters of credit, or provide credit terms. I want to go back for a second, because I really didn't spend enough time on this one slide. I'm just going to talk about it. I'm not going to go back to it. But on the first slide where I listed the types of direct, with you hiring a representative or a broker overseas, that would be much like the buying agent, as we talked about with the indirect, but that's basically you hiring a sales representative, maybe an independent contractor, to go overseas and represent you, or who's already overseas to represent you and find you customers. And a distributor usually is somebody who's in country, who has a warehouse potentially and has a big business and is distributing to potentially who you think your target market is. So I kind of want you to understand those, because that distributor relationship is actually a really good way to enter the market in the beginning. If you're going to go direct, is finding a really good distributor who's in country, who has the ability and has customers already lined up and thinks that there's a product for you. And again, some of the questions that I've listed, when you get into that warehouse and the trade zones are wonderful if you know how to work with them. And that's probably a topic for another discussion, but trade zones exist in pretty much every country of the world. And often I have used them as regional distribution points. So for example, in Panama, I've used it as a distribution point for around the world. I'll give you another example right now is I used to work, we used to distribute to cruise lines, and we actually set up, cruise lines are a unique entity because they're actually almost like their own country. They don't actually have to pay duties anywhere. So we would set up free trade zone distribution in various trade zones around the world, so that when those ships docked, we hadn't paid any duty because it hadn't been imported, and then they didn't have to pay any duty, and it went right on the ship and it was consumed. So if you are dealing with something like that as a cruise line, you could utilize a free trade zone for that purpose, or you could utilize it to distribute throughout a region. You could set up in a free trade zone in Hong Kong, or like Shenzhen, China, and you could distribute throughout Asia, for example, from that vantage point. And the other thing is manufacturing can be done in a trade zone. So again, back to that apples and applesauce, if your applesauce manufacturer happens to be located in a free trade zone, you can either store in the free trade zone, or you could ship directly to the free trade zone, and then they can do the manufacturing in the trade zone. And it changes the because it's completely transformed, it changes what their duty rate is. So if you have a customer who's in a free trade zone, don't shy away from selling to them. That's actually a great opportunity. And again, setting up a 3-party warehouse, there's no shortage of them. If you are looking at some point to do those, I would always start with your international freight forwarder, because they have a lot of contacts overseas with good companies. Don't just go window shopping on the internet, because you might not find a really good one. So start with somebody you already have a relationship with. But if you have questions about any of these methods, we can certainly take those here in a couple seconds. The other things to consider with your country and your market considerations are, as we talk, the ease of entry. Again, Brazil, not to pick on them, but they're not the easiest country. Mexico is actually not that easy either. On the other side, I would say Canada is relatively easy, right? So you have those kinds of considerations that you need to look at, along with the competition. As I mentioned, if there is already a saturated market of competition, is that really a market you want to go to? You know that there's a market for your product, but now you're competing with 500 other companies. Might not be as much opportunity for you if it's a saturated market. So you do want to understand what that competition is. And again, are you creating a market for something that you think will work? I did this with maple syrup. I knew that the Asian market really liked sweet things. They love honey, for example. and there's a shortage of honey, global shortage. But if could get the maple syrup into the market in the hands. And I will tell you, when I went to a show, I had products. Trust me, the Koreans loved maple syrup, right? My Chinese and Taiwanese loved the maple syrup. Couldn't get enough of it. Problem was, I was trying to create a market for something that they tasted, they liked it sweet. It was a new product, but they weren't willing to pay for it. In fact, I had one Chinese buyer who wanted to pay $2, literally $2 for a big bottle of maple syrup. Now, if you buy maple syrup, maple syrup is not cheap. And why? Because it's harvested once a year. And I got maple trees in my backyard. I can't wait for the thaw to start tapping. But maple syrup is only harvested in the spring, in the thaw. And it takes a lot of sap and a lot of trees to make even one bottle. So the price point's very, very high. I couldn't even buy it on a lower than wholesale cost at $2. So there was an unrealistic expectation, which is back to what we were talking about in the beginning with that price sensitivity. They love the product. I think there's market potential for it, but not at that price point. So that was part of my struggle with trying to get things into that market. So it's like finding the market or creating a market. Does it exist? And can you also meet that price point? Again, you need to consider your transit time and the mode of transport, whether you're going to air freight it, which is very expensive, or ocean, which is very expensive right now. And those costs, your logistics and distribution capabilities, or those of your partner that you're using. And when I say partner in this case, I mean like your distributor or your trading company. And of course, your legal and regulatory matters and barriers to entry. Some countries have quotas, some countries have licensing requirements, and a whole bunch of other things, and just making it difficult for direct entry. So you do need to consider that as well. So in short, there really is no right or wrong way to start exporting. Zara said this at the beginning. The best method is ultimately what's best for you and your goals. The long term should be actually considering using multiple methods because it will increase your sales. So be flexible, be open to how you're doing this. Don't hog tie yourself to one method or even one country in the long term. Set a long-term strategy for what you want, but in the beginning, pick one country, do your research, know that there's a market, focus on it, focus on your mode of entry, and then look at what your long-term is and possibly add additional countries. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because we are getting a little bit short on time, but I want to make sure that we cover this and that you understand that some of the things that you're looking for is really, do they have experience and do they already sell your product or a similar product? I mean, again, if they're used to dealing with construction equipment and they just think, oh, we'd love to do agriculture or we'll try to help you, but they don't have buyers for that. You're really looking at trying to find companies that have experience doing your type of product, want to sell your product, have the distribution channels, and that they're not using competing exact products, maybe something similar, and that they're large enough to accomplish your desired results. And that's important. I don't want to bash the small company because I started a trading company with one person, me. So I hate to say that they're large enough, but again, size isn't the only determining factor. I was focused specifically on agriculture. Name of my business was Harvest Global Trading. It was all agriculture, food products. I had a strict requirement that they had no less than 50% US content, which is what the US government uses for their grant programs. And really most of my products were close to 100%. I think I had one that was like 95 because they used a couple of seasonings from overseas, but everything else was from the US. And it was really important to me to try and help US companies and US products get into a foreign market. I was one person. And so you can go with a one person company if they meet the other criterias, or a small company that has one focus and really knows what they're doing might actually work really well for you if they're working with you on a partnership basis and you're kind of like in the loop. So that is possible, but you need to find that right fit for you. So don't rule out the small company. So yeah, they're large enough to accomplish desired results, but again, really big, they might not care either. So you want to really kind of balance that. I want to know if they have the finances and the financial strength. What are their sales outlets, and do they have facilities? This would be mostly for like a distributor. Trading companies typically do not have their own warehouse, but they might work with warehouses. But chances are you're looking at a distributor in this case. They have the proper facilities and temperature control or whatever is required. And can they have after sales follow through? But also really important, do they know the culture? Do they know how to negotiate the ins and outs of government regulations, things that you may not know? And you don't maybe have relationships with Chinese customs authorities or Korean or Singaporean, or Chilean, wherever you're going. I know I've made contacts over the years in many of these countries, but there's still a whole lot of people I don't know. And I rely very heavily on finding companies that I work with that do have that knowledge. And again, I can't underscore this one point one more time, not just because this is being put on by your government agencies, but it is really important that, especially when dealing with locals and government regulations and things in country, that you utilize your U.S. Embassy locations in country and the government resources such as the FAS and the commercial guide once you're in the country and before. But certainly if you're doing business in Korea, for example, and you're having some issues, that's what those resources are there for. And you're already paying them with your tax dollars. And we've got wonderful resources in our government agencies, so many that honestly, a lot of companies don't even know all of the resources that are out there. But I am 100% certain that Julie and Zara can point you in the right direction of these. And even if they can't, I can. So there's some really wonderful agencies that you need to really tap into those resources. Some of the initial information you should obtain, again, references, bank references, information about, how long they've been in business and any special requirements. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going on this because it's self-explanatory and you can read this. So I want you to really just kind of go through this. And this is really just for you. I was trying to give you some guidelines to know the kinds of things that you should look for and ask for. And again, there's some additional questions. There might be some duplication, but there's some additional questions in that handout that you should also look at. Now, I want to be very clear. This is not an exclusive list. That doesn't mean I didn't miss something. Those are just like standard questions for you to certainly begin with to start narrowing down. But you may have some specific questions related to your product or things that are important to you, and do not be afraid to ask those questions. It's very, very important that you make good decisions and you're not afraid to do that. So quickly, where can you find some buyers should you decide to go more of the direct route? Well, the first stop should be your Washington State Department of Agriculture and Julie, because she's going to have a lot of information and she can also point you in the right direction of other agencies, as I mentioned. USADA, which is the Western United States Agriculture Trade Administration. I personally have not worked with them, but I know they're very similar to who I have worked with, which is food exports in the Northeast. And I can tell you that it was a fantastic relationship. They put on some amazing programs. They help with trade missions, trade shows, and buyers missions, which are the next thing. Whoops. And now I'm being beeped at to tell me to stop talking. Trade shows and trade missions, wonderful opportunities. And there's some grant programs if you're eligible to go on those. So again, I know that Julie can give you some information on those things or point you in the right direction. I'm a big fan of buyers missions for a couple of reasons. One, it's in the United States, so you don't have to leave the country. So it's cheaper just by that. You don't have all the travel and the expenses, and they're usually located in your state or in your region. And on top of that, they're very inexpensive to participate in. Trade shows by nature can be expensive. I think it was actually 8 years ago today that I was at my buyer's mission in Boston. It came up on my memories this morning. And honestly, I think my fee to attend was like $300 or something. It really wasn't a lot of money. I don't know what USADA charges, but compared to going to a trade show, it's not expensive. And you get an opportunity with real buyers who have come to this country from multiple countries who are looking for your types of products. They're specifically coming for ag products, and you get a table and you can set up all of your stuff, and you get to sit for me, it was 30-minute sessions with these buyers and to have a conversation. And I walked away from that one day with like 15 quotes, different countries. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of the buyers that came to my table and wanted quotes were not originally at that buyer's mission looking for my type of product. And then they saw my product and was like, oh, we really like this. And we got 3 specific sales from that, from customers around the world in countries we weren't looking at, and with people who weren't actually looking for our product when they came to the mission. So it's a tremendous opportunity. I would tell you to really get involved with that. Obviously, the Foreign Ag Service and the U.S. Commercial Service Office and foreign embassies I've mentioned. Your online presence and marketing. There are many companies out there that can help you with that. They do charge money, and the rates are not cheap. So just keep that in mind. I'm pretty sure the government has some resources that can help you with some of those, and people that they can refer you to. But just be aware that it does exist, and it's not the cheapest thing. But if you are going to start to sell direct, you definitely want to have some sort of an online presence in a foreign language, and make sure that you're complying with the government requirements in that country for advertising. And then may not be right for a lot of people, but the government assistance programs such as Gold Key Service, where you pay a fee and they help you basically find and vet some buyers, does work for a lot of companies. It's not for everybody, but I know many companies who have had success with that. So you may want to ask Julie and others for that assistance as well. This is a cute picture of me 8 years ago, and I can definitely tell by looking at it, I've aged. But this was my business. And I really just want you to know that this is the right way to do a buyer's mission or a trade show. And the only reason I put this picture in here to tell you, this is sort of an add-on, is I was the only table at that entire buyer's mission full of food and agriculture products that actually had any food. I was shocked. And Julie was telling me that, most of the companies you guys, that they help you and prepare. So maybe you're a little bit more prepared, but most companies literally had just a jar just sitting in front of them with maybe a business card or a small brochure. So my table was the most popular table there because they got to eat and they were sampling all the products. And you can see I have my folders in front of me that had my logo on the front. And basically, by the way, I made these at Staples. I just went and got folders and then printed my logos on stickers at Staples and stuck them. I tried to center them. That was the most challenging part of that. And then I put in my business card and my colored brochures on the inside, but it's all about presentation and looking like you're prepared. You're not going to have your price list necessarily there, especially if you're new, because again, how much you're going to sell it for is price sensitive. That might be something you have to sit down and negotiate, but at the very least, you should have some product samples or little samples they can take away with them. I had little tiny baby jars of maple syrup that people were hoarding. I had little pancakes in those crock pots and syrup, and I had dipping sauces, and I had some very hungry buyers who came over, I think, just to eat. But I got asked by Food Export Northeast to stay late because there were that many buyers who wanted to meet with me, and I ran out of time slots. So I think it was supposed to end like at 5, and I was there until like 10 o'clock at night. So you can definitely meet buyers at a buyer's mission, but I want you to remember this picture and remember to offer samples and to, have some food tasting and be prepared, because if nothing else, they're going to come to your table because they want to taste your product, and you get a buyer right in front of you. So in summary, I think I went maybe a couple minutes over. There are several options for exporters to distribute your product, and you can use more than one method. Flexibility gives customers options, and they don't all fit into one basket. Think your long-term strategy, not short-term. Utilize your government and trade association resources. Be prepared, be prepared, be prepared. Use caution, as I mentioned, when entering into legal contracts with foreign countries, especially not just exclusivity, but any contract, because remember, if it's a foreign country contract, then the foreign country's rules are going to legally, you may have to go through their court. So you want to be careful and do your research and know the government regulations in the US for your exports and all the countries that you wish to participate in. And with that, I will shut up and take questions.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. Wow, it's a lot of information. I hope we didn't scare you. I don't see any questions right now, but if anyone has any questions, you can always send it to us via email. You can send it via chat right now. Julie, do you have any questions?
I don't. Yeah, just thank you for joining us, and feel free to reach out to Zara and I for any follow-up questions. And yeah, thank you.
Right. Thank you all for joining us. I will send a follow-up email this afternoon. So it will include the slides. It will include Julie and my contact information. So you'll know where to find us. And I'll have a survey there. Now, just don't be afraid to write whatever like you think is in the survey. I know some people had issues connecting to this webinar. So put it in there too. We won't judge you. It's completely confidential. And really, it allows us to develop this or make other programs in the future better. Crossing my fingers. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Kelly.
I will add, if anybody thinks of a question after this, if they didn't put it in the chat box, that they are more than welcome to feed it to you and then to me, or yeah, I think I put my email on the last slide if they have questions. So, you know, I'm happy to answer questions. I know just from my own webinar, sometimes I think my question is stupid and I don't want to ask it. So feel free to send me a message. I promise I will not think anything of it.
We won't judge you.
No, I'd rather you get the information that you want. And even if, you know, I went kind of fast and I talk kind of fast and there's a lot of information there. So hopefully I gave you something useful, but if there's something else you need or a question, I'm certainly happy to assist.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelly. Again, thank you, Julie. Thank you everyone for coming, and you know where to find us.
Yes. And Incoterms next week at this time.
Have it next week, right?
So you all need to sign up.
Next Wednesday, join us for more excitement.
Well, hopefully, hopefully it's exciting. So.
Great. Thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.